Good morning. Welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am your host, Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how are we this fine morning?
A little jealous you have more tattoos on right now than I do. Like my goal is to have sleeves. Sam's over here just absolutely tatted. For anybody who's not watching the video stream, Sam is absolutely tatted up right now. He has a wonderful bearded Santa with angel wings and a Santa hat.
And all sorts of Christmassy style sleeves on the this is one of my favorite Christmas shirts.
That's awesome. And I want everybody to know before this started, I did, like, when Sam and I were just talking, this was not on there. This is a total surprise.
I had it on underneath and I was like, nope, I'm totally gonna, when I was putting it on, I'm like, nope, I'm totally just surprising. So
yes,
yes, sir.
1000% you did.
Well, as we trudge forward towards the Christmas holiday next week, we've got a lot to talk about this week, Tony. We've got the CFP kicking off tonight with a Big Ten team playing. So we're gonna preview and break that down and kind of see how we think things will go during that game between the Indiana Hoosiers. Yes, I'm gonna say the Indiana Hoosiers. I'll say it all together, that way everybody knows I'm talking about the university. Traveling to South Bend and taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the first ever of the 12-team CFP playoff bracket. And we'll talk about that. We've got some other, we're going to do a little bit of the preview we'll preview the others that are taking place tomorrow: Ohio State and Tennessee, and Penn State and SMU. And go about those, talk about those, and then also, if we've got time, we'll jump over to the hardwood where it's really starting to heat up, Tony. It's really starting to get interesting on both the men and women's side. Our former co-host Dalton Shetler, his Spartans, he's seeing some very good basketball in East Lansing from the Lady Spartans. But we'll talk if we've got time allotted.
Yep.
We will talk about both of the men and the women over on the hardwood. But let's jump into the CFP. It's kicking off tonight in South Bend. Like I just mentioned, the Indiana Hoosiers 11-1 taking on the 11-1 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Hoosiers are the 10 seed and the Fighting Irish are the 7 seed. Just looking at it from face value, Tony, without doing any sort of analysis, what do you see this game on its face?
Honestly, I see this as a pretty interesting matchup, because if you look at it for face value, you've got Marcus Freeman, who has started to really establish himself and help reestablish Notre Dame as being able to take on just about anybody. And I say that because they went into Kyle Field at the beginning of the season to take on Texas A&M and beat them in their own home. Went on and beat them. Now, on the other side, they ended up losing literally the very next week to Northern Illinois. But then after that, they went on a 10-game winning streak, and they've been riding that ever since. On Indiana, on the other hand, though, they've beat everybody that they faced with the exception of Ohio State. That was the only one that a lot of us were like, okay, if you're going to lose a game, it's probably going to be there because it's in Columbus. They're an overall better stacked team. Many Buckeyes fans might disagree, but they're better coached than the Hoosiers to an extent. But this is an Indiana team that is honestly, they're playing with house money. They are absolutely, running the Cinderella story as it stands right now, because nobody expected the Hoosiers to win 11 games at all. And here they are, for the very first time ever, not only in the college football playoffs, but in that 12-team format, like you mentioned. So face value, it's interesting because you have a Cinderella story versus a very well-established big football brand that is trying to reassert themselves as hey, no, we're not in a conference. No, we don't always take on the big boys, but we can hang with the best of anybody.
If you say so. But this is and I told you that if these two teams played, this would be like the White Sox and the Cardinals for a Cubs fan to watch in the World Series. Because Which team, though, would you rather see lose more? Which would you rather see? I would rather see Notre Dame lose more because I haven't been tortured by IU on the football side of my fandom nearly as much as I have been Notre Dame. But let's say it this way: taking off the Boilermaker hat, this is going to be a very interesting game because of I don't care. I know I've said this to you. I don't care about schedule. I really don't. Who has the better loss of these two teams? It's not Notre Dame. It certainly isn't Notre Dame because they lost at the place they're hosting IU.
Correct.
They lost there to Northern Illinois. And so that's what is the interesting thing about this game for me is IU, everybody with the exception, like you said, other than Ohio State, they have dominated everyone.
Yep.
Except for maybe Michigan, but they played well enough. And you know what? Period. Don't care what you're trying to argue. Well, Ohio State has nope.
Say Indiana did what Ohio State
Indiana beat
Michigan
and walk away. Okay, so let's drop that. But I think overall this is maybe not the most entertaining game of the weekend, probably, but to me, I see IU beating Notre Dame more than I even see SMU beating Penn State. Really, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. It's not that I don't see a potential upset. I just think that Notre Dame's setting itself up for, until the back-to-back pick sixes against USC played them very closely, and they were playing very well. And it blew it open enough to where, okay, Notre Dame can be played with. They're not so offensively. I think if Ohio State and Notre Dame played one another, I don't know that it would be close. And that's just my personal opinion. Because I think Ohio State, doesn't matter how they've played down to their opponents, they are, to me, and yes, I mean this, the most talented roster in the country right
100%. Now. I think the same thing that holds Ohio State back is the same thing that holds Notre Dame back, and I think it's the quarterback position.
Sure.
And I say that because I remember watching Riley Leonard last year at Duke, and it wasn't that he's necessarily bad, but he's an average pocket passing game manager. He likes to make plays more with his legs as far as running the ball goes. And while, yes, that's kind of more of the standard in both college and the professional side of football now, that's not something I necessarily want out of my quarterback. And especially in a game where throwing the football is probably going to be considered secondary because of how cold it is. It's going to be hard for guys to catch. Now, the only advantage is both of these teams are from up here in the north, so they're a little bit more used to it as compared to what everybody else is going to be.
It's not surprising either team. Not one team.
Right.
Neither team has an advantage of, well, we play in this weather and you don't. The other two Big Ten teams involved this weekend, they have that little bit of an advantage.
Right, because they both play teams from the South who they're used to dealing with cold, but not this level of cold.
And let's get down to that. It's gonna be cold Saturday.
27 degrees.
All three sites.
Yeah,
all three sites.
Yeah, I think none of the places are supposed to be over 30. They're all supposed to be below freezing, and I think overcast with overall just crappy weather. Not supposed to be raining or snowing, but just overall crappy weather.
But that the one thing that I saw, excuse me, the forecast for Notre Dame Stadium is it's gonna be windy, and that is going, like you said, that's going to affect how teams pass the ball. And I think Riley, if I'm gonna pick a quarterback, it's not Riley Leonard that I'm picking as the better of the two in this game. It's just not. Rourke is an absolute. He's put on a season that has been in a really he's done more than just managed games. He's thrown to make games or to give IU the big leads that they've got. So if there's one thing, will it neutralize IU's passing offense a little bit? Maybe, but honestly, like we said, they both play in this weather already, so it's not that much of an advantage when it comes to playing in it and having to deal with that swirling wind, that crosswind that might screw with the throwing capabilities. I don't know that exists as much as maybe either of the other two games. But honestly, the way IU's been playing, minus what they did against Ohio State, you have to say, okay, let's take both of these teams' losses out and just say, what have they done? Notre Dame's beaten some good teams. The Navy and Army both ranked at the time that they played Notre Dame, Texas A&M. But honestly, they haven't done it in the fashion in which IU's done it. Now, has IU played the strength of schedule? If you take away Ohio State, they don't have a great strength of schedule. They don't.
No.
As soon as you throw Ohio State in there, they have the best of those fringe teams' strength of schedule. Before they were talking, before this whole bracket was in, or finalized, they were comparing, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, IU, all of these teams, and IU had the best strength of schedule. And look at what they have done. I mean. And it's not even that it's this isn't a big thing because I'm a Purdue fan. It's a big thing because I'm a Purdue fan because Purdue got their butts handed to them. They beat their rival by 60 points.
Yeah,
IU did.
I will say it's kind of a slight towards your Boilermakers, but it is also a neutral thing. Of Notre Dame dropped 66 on Purdue, but Purdue scored a touchdown against Notre Dame. Purdue didn't score anything against IU, and they also dropped 66. So I'm just saying.
In all fairness, they kind of gave up shortly after they got beat by Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about, though, is everybody that's been placed in front of IU, they have minus the win they got against Michigan. That's the only close game there's been, other than the loss to Ohio State and the win against Michigan. They have absolutely dominated everybody else. And honestly, I think that's what gives me the thought that maybe IU can pull this off. I may be way wrong. And if I am, I'll sleep just fine tonight. That's fine.
Yeah.
But it's a real thing to where if you're sleeping on IU and if you're Notre Dame and sleeping on IU, your season's gonna end tonight. Period.
Yeah. Dismiss them at your own peril. And because if you look at Notre Dame, especially early on in the season, they lost so many players on the defensive side of the ball. Now they're getting a couple of them back. However, though, they're coming back after having been off for weeks and months at a time now. So they're going to have a little bit of, field rust as they're trying to get on there in the field, kind of get back into the groove. IU has pretty much had everybody. They've had that continuity. And again, if we know anything about Coach Signetti, with the exception of Ohio State, he has had this team coached extremely well to come in. We need to establish ourselves. We need to establish the run game. There's a reason why Curtis Rourke was considered, 9th or 10th in the Heisman voting race. Because, he had an absolutely prolific season considering he was at IU and the fact that they finished 11-1. He threw 27 touchdowns to 4 picks.
Anybody that wants to try to say he wasn't deserving, he is this year. He's having one of the 10 top
10 years for sure
of the in college football. So there's no doubt in my mind because, like you said, he's only thrown 4 interceptions, and that to me is if your quarterback can keep from turning the ball over, he sure as heck ain't going to lose games for you.
Yeah, well, and plus too, look at how many starting quarterbacks are out there in college football. How many of them they throw less than 4 picks in playing almost an entire season? He missed 2 games? Actually, a game and a half. Because he missed half of one game.
Half of Nebraska and then the very next game.
Yeah, and was back for Michigan and Ohio State.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's about as good as you can ask from what is essentially a full college football season.
Yeah.
And realistically, what is going to be now because you added
Maybe
the
he
Notre Dame
throws
game to make up
one
for it.
more interception. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So,
yeah, he's definitely, because at 4, he's averaging 1 every 2.5 games, maybe. If you want to look at it that way, maybe. But yeah, it's IU has. They're not walking into this with 0 chance to win this ball game. Absolutely not doing that. I mean, and anybody that says there is no chance, I can't take you seriously, because and this is coming from a Purdue fan. Okay, IU. I would like to see IU win this game, because. And it's not because I hate Notre Dame per se, but it's because I like seeing the underdogs win. I like seeing those. They're having a great season. They've been rewarded to get to the tournament, but I want to see them do something in the tournament. Do I want to see them to go to the Final Four or the semifinals in the championship? No, I don't think that would happen, even if I did want that to happen. But I could see them winning this game.
Yeah,
I think there are people that would disagree, that say, it depends on the quarterback situation for the next round, but whoever wins this is, Notre Dame could. I've seen people say Notre Dame's going to the national championship game. I'm not going to go that far.
Right.
Could they beat Georgia? Yeah, but Georgia's got a lot of talent, and if you throw quarterbacks into it, and it is Stockton, he's just as serviceable as Riley Leonard.
Yeah, if not a little bit more. Then
you match up the rest of the rosters, and Georgia, and I don't think IU would beat Georgia either. So
no.
I think whoever wins this game is going into the next game with trying to climb a very big hill. Against Georgia, but so let's get your thoughts then, with a little bit further analysis of it. How you think this game plays out on tonight? Then 8 p.m. on ABC.
On ABC, I kind of agree, because there's a couple people earlier on the radio, yesterday on the radio, talking about the fact that it is going to be cold weather, so you're probably not going to have a lot of these high-scoring, prolific games.
Right.
I could honestly see like a 20-17, maybe even 17-14 type matchup. I'm going to give it to Notre Dame just because I think the overall on paper talent is better. And, Marcus Freeman has proven himself more as an established coach, at least at the Power 4 level than Coach Cignetti has. But again,
he has a better winning percentage.
He does. He has a better winning percentage. And again, he's taken an IU team farther than they have gone in, 50 plus years, as far as, competing. They were a tiebreaker short of competing for the Big Ten title. They have the most points scored averaged in a game than any of the other playoff teams, with over 44 points a game.
They have the nation's second best scoring defense too.
That too. And yeah, you can't hardly run the ball on them at all, which realistically, that's what you need to do, especially if you can't throw the ball in the cold. You're going to have to be able to run it. And IU says, no, not in my house. Well, Notre Dame's house, but it's still Indiana. Although I will say, I think it's a little bit of bias that the football committee said, we can't have 2 teams from Indiana in these playoffs, so we need to knock this down just to one.
We can, but they got to play each other.
Yeah,
so moving on, there's only one.
Indiana doesn't get more than one.
That's right.
Stop it.
I honestly, you brushed upon why I think IU has a better chance than others to win as a lower seed, and it's because, excuse me, of their run defense. They've got the second best scoring defense in the country. We talked about that, or just mentioned that, but the run defense.
Yeah.
What did we talk about prior to this that's going to be happening? Crosswinds. It's going to mess with your passing game. You might be able to get your dinks and dunks. But if you try to go over the middle or go deep, that's going to mess with your accuracy. Not saying it's not doable, but honestly, I think if there's one quarterback that you worry about the wind messing with his game, it's Riley Leonard. And if
Yeah.
he can't throw and they can't run, Notre Dame's in a whole world of trouble.
Yeah. And I think what might also get them is because of that, I'm afraid Riley Leonard might try to overcompensate, and he's probably going to try to run it more. And if you know anything about being in the cold, especially if you get hit in the cold, those hits hurt a whole lot
and
worse.
They linger,
and
you get up and you're like, oh,
and you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to do that for 60 minutes of regulation playing time at minimum. Like you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. My question is Notre Dame's defense is pretty darn good too. Can IU put together enough in accordance to what their defense is doing against Notre Dame's offense to win the ball game? I just don't know that they have enough. I really don't know that they've got enough to offensively put enough points on the board, because they're going to give up points. It's just going to happen, and you're not going to shut out the number 5 team in the country. You're just not going to, even though you're the number 8. It's a tough one to look at.
Do you almost look at it as similar to how they may have approached the Michigan game of, look, this is still a very talented team that has a good defense. Obviously we knew Michigan coming in, the quarterback situation is a huge question mark. Alex Orji is probably the best comparison as far as a athletic mobile quarterback that they're probably going to use to run on them. Mm-hmm. Do you think they use probably a similar game plan? Because realistically, that's about as close as you get.
I honestly think that's a very good point. Is they, not that they're going to make a exact facsimile of it. They're going to they're going to say, okay, this was our game plan against Michigan. Where do these match up perfectly, and what do we change just enough to try to combat against Notre Dame? Now, Notre Dame's side, they may say, hey, we match up very similarly to Michigan, a team they beat. This is what they did. We need to do these things different. It's a chess game. But right now, I personally think Kurt Cignetti's playing 3D chess compared to just regular chess for the others.
Right.
A man that does what he did with a roster. Now, granted, he brought 17 kids with him from James Madison, but that roster was still, and they were there when the preseason poll came out. They were still expected to finish 17th.
Yeah,
they finished 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in their entire conference.
Yeah, 3rd.
And keep in mind too, and I know you're aware of this, but for anybody else, James Madison is not exactly a big, NFL college talented school. Like, they have good players, like they've won their, conference and whatnot, but it's not one of those like, you were looking for transfer portal players, you got to go to JMU to get them. Like, no,
they were a pretty good FCS. FCS team. They were a pretty good FCS program, but then they made the switch to FBS, and they're not. There's a reason why they're not in a Power 4 conference. They're just not. Yeah. They're not loaded. They're not able to bring in those players right now.
But they did. They did win their conference this year.
Absolutely, and that was without 17.
Without those 17 and Coach Cignetti.
So but they're a good program, but not a great program in the FBS.
Right.
So, so he wasn't bringing 17 from the Alabama roster to IU. He was bringing 17 from James Madison, which, don't get me wrong, better maybe than the 17 that those guys replaced. Sure. But still, you'd not one that you would think, hey, this roster could finish 3rd in the Big Ten.
And it's going to sound crazy, but this was brought up yesterday, and I really liked the comparison that was made. So this actually is a little bit of Big Ten news too, that if anybody has noticed all of the USC transfers that Lincoln Riley has lost, they lost, I think, 4 of the 5-star recruits that they had from the class of 2022 and 2023. They've lost all of them, and a majority of it has been due to money. And somebody brought up the fact that they really like the fact that Bill Belichick went to North Carolina, and that he may run things the exact same way of, look, I'm not looking for the $1 million to $2 million, big flashy wide receiver, big flashy quarterback. And I think Coach Cignetti has approached that very similarly to his days from recruiting at Alabama with Saban of, look, I don't need the big flashy 5-star player. I need a player that I know is going to be considered undervalued, underrated, but is going to perform to my expectations and what I feel is going to be best for the scheme. And I think that's exactly what he's done with IU to be able to, like you said, get them from not finishing 17th and finishing 3rd in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and this is not meant to be a 20-minute rant of how we think or hope IU can win this game or will win this game. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to unpack with this matchup against Notre Dame, because Notre Dame is a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely am not silly enough to think that they're not. I just think that they've set themselves up with their roster, not set themselves up for failure, but to be prone to an upset in this round. From this point on, after this round, it would be them upsetting whoever they play, if they were to win. But they're set up with a matchup that I don't know, maybe they were laughing or smiling about when they got it.
Yeah, and I think too, and I'm hoping, just to at least keep it interesting, that they learned from that NIU matchup and losing it. And I feel like we've watched a few teams over the season do this, and we even watched Ohio State do it against Michigan. I think a lot of these teams that, okay, on paper, we match up better. We had the better talent. We overall had the better roster. You could maybe even make an argument for some of the matchups. They have better coaching, and then they get upset. And I just wonder if Notre Dame maybe didn't learn their lesson early on against NIU because of that. And maybe they're not going to underestimate the Hoosiers. Like I said, and like we talked about earlier, if they do, it's going to be your own fault if you're potentially sitting at home and then you have to watch IU get crushed by Georgia.
The one thing I will say is I don't know that it's just going to be as easy as them to say, let's remember Northern Illinois. Because Northern Illinois is not at the caliber this season of what IU is.
Correct. But again, they underestimated them, though, and that's where they got sloppy and they made mistakes.
But that's what I'm saying is they gave the blueprint of how you can beat them.
True.
There are now not every roster and few rosters can mimic the exact blueprint and beat the number 5 team in the country at home in the least ideal situation weather-wise. But I use a good one to come in and give it a shot. So
that's true.
It'll be interesting tonight. I think Notre Dame still pulls it out. I think I'm in the same realm as you, 21-17, 20-17, somewhere in there. It's not going to be high scoring, but it'll be a very interesting game to watch tonight at Notre Dame Stadium, 8:00 p.m. on ABC. Let's move to tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big day too, starting at noon. It's wonderful when you can say, okay, we've got games that matter at noon.
Yes.
You can wake up and have breakfast and then put on your little slippies and just sit inside and watch the games. But at 12 noon tomorrow, the number 10 seeded SMU Mustangs take on the number 6 seeded Penn State Nittany Lions. But the 4th ranked, let's stop doing that.
I know. It throws everybody off.
The CFP should not put out their rankings and then seed differently than what their rankings have. They just shouldn't. But anyways, Beaver Stadium tomorrow, noon on TNT, the Nittany Lions and the Mustangs from the Great White North.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In a whiteout game at that.
Yeah, a whiteout game, but in the sense of there's a lot of snow on the ground too. Yes. I think this is what actually makes me think that SMU has less of a chance than IU does going into Notre Dame tonight.
Yeah, I think because at least for Notre Dame, they're almost at the disadvantage because Bloomington is just close enough. You could have a lot of Hoosiers fans travel the 3 hours up north.
I wholeheartedly believe you will.
So for Notre Dame, they kind of lose that home field advantage. For the Nittany Lions, I mean, a whole lot of people from Dallas like, yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up to Pennsylvania and I'm going to watch the Nittany Lions
of a snowstorm.
In the middle of the snowstorm in Pennsylvania face my Mustang. Like, nah,
right.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, hats off to SMU. They should be there.
Yep.
They should be there. They have shown they're worthy. I think I would be ranting and raving still had they been dropped out of the tournament for another team wearing.
They say I almost said it. I was about to be like, not as deserving as another team we know down from the south.
But I think they're going to put up a fight. A lot of people have SMU winning because they just don't think Penn State is a real powerhouse. And I'm sorry, the only game they lost was to Ohio State. Yes, they underperformed. They absolutely underperformed. They left a lot of points on the field instead of cashing them in, and they lost by 6. They should have beaten Ohio State. They absolutely should have. And I'm sorry, they lost their second game to Oregon, but
correct. But they kept that close. They ended up keeping that closer than what it looked like initially,
even though it was a 2-possession game for most of the game.
Right. Penn State honestly reminds me of the Big Ten's version of Notre Dame. An extremely talented, and it does, because if you look and you think about it, Penn State is a massive college football brand. You know, you look at all the greats that have come out of Penn State, at least in just the last 20 plus years or so. You got LeVar Arrington, you've got Saquon Barkley, you've got Micah Parsons, you've got Joey Porter Jr. You know, you've got all of these. I think Mike Gesicki came from Penn State. One of those big tight ends came from there. I think it's Mike Gesicki. Anyway, you've got a plethora of really good players coming out of there, and they're always ranked extremely high. And, like we've talked about forever on the show, how they can't get over the boogeyman that is Ohio State and Michigan. They always seem to come up short whenever the big games matter most. Now, again, they've kept it close. They end up keeping it more competitive than what it looks like initially, but it seems like they get overwhelmed very quickly, and then they try to dig themselves out of the hole. And that's kind of what I feel with Penn State, is they do the exact same thing that Notre Dame does. It's like, okay, we have the talent. We're a little cocky. We're going to come in here. We're going to do it. And then they get upset or they get beat. At least with Penn State, they're not losing to the facts. They're not losing to teams like NIU. However, you did come really close to losing to USC and Minnesota both.
And Bowling Green.
So I'm not going to say the Mustangs don't have a chance, because, they had a fantastic year in the ACC. Their 2 losses, as much as I hate the term quality losses, they lost to, at the time, a number 9 BYU team out of the Big 12. They lost to them. That's respectable. And they lost to Clemson in the ACC championship. And, the end of the day, nobody really expected Clemson to be there. And I honestly think Clemson just wanted it a little bit more than SMU did. No fault to them. And SMU was still able to get in the playoffs. So at the end, it doesn't really matter.
The fact that SMU only lost by a possession got them in. Had they lost by the 17 that they were down at the half, they wouldn't be. We'd be talking about how this is an injustice. I honestly do believe that, because I would still be mad about it because of what the committee says. You're not going to be punished for losing your conference championship game.
But unless you lose by like 3 touchdowns.
It allows Alabama in. Yeah. But I think the Mustangs, they've got an uphill battle to fight when it comes to playing Penn State. And Penn State's got the home field. That is extremely advantageous. Penn State has the fact that there's 17 feet of snow on the ground. Yes. And yes, they were able to clear off the field. And no, there's not supposed to be more snow in the forecast. But it's still going to be there. It's going to be cold. It's going to be blustery. It's going to be almost identical as to what it is tonight in South Bend. And it's going to be almost identical to what it is at the Shoe tomorrow night. It's just this game to me reads, this is going to be an old-fashioned Big Ten punch you in the mouth with the running game. And right now, I don't know that SMU has enough to stick with them.
Yeah. And, I know we talked about it a little bit, and I'm going to try to sneak it in here real quick. Because we got to talk, because it is interesting, because to me, say SMU is able to maybe prevent that socket in the mouth that we just talked about. Maybe they take Drew Aller out. What does Penn State do?
Yeah, because you just mentioned, or we talked about it off the air. Bo Perbula, their backup quarterback, he's not with the team any longer.
Out.
He hit the transfer portal, and he is not going to be with the Nittany Lions. That's a great point, because the Lions need to make sure they're doing everything they can to make sure Drew Aller doesn't get hurt.
Well, not only that, but here's the other thing that I would potentially pitch. Let's say SMU shocks everybody and say they're up 21-3. Drew Aller has thrown 2 to 3 interceptions. And James Franklin's like, you know what? Seen enough. You have struggled all
they
first
go to
half.
The Wildcat and their tight ends, their quarterback the rest of the
Number 44, Tyler Warren. He does everything else. Play quarterback too, buddy.
He's a fantastic player.
That's true. But that does kind of, raise a lot of interesting questions. And I kind of liked how James Franklin approached it, because I felt like he approached it as a genuinely good coach and as a genuinely decent human being of, look, Bo went out there, by the time we finish, there's only so many quarterback spots that are going to be out there and that's going to be available. He wants to find the best one for him. And he goes, I'm happy for him. I wish him nothing but the best. But that puts us in a really bad situation. And I 100% agree. I think, all honesty, and I think a couple of other people have, voiced their opinions about this, that the entire transfer portal needs to not open until after the playoffs are over, because then everybody is on the same playing field. Because you're even seeing guys, there's a transfer from Georgia. It's like, dude, you just won the SEC championship. You're already transferred. Like, what are you doing? You're going to potentially compete for another national title.
Spots close up.
They do, but it's also like, if you're already on the team and you're probably going to potentially be a starter, like, what are you doing? But I do think that they need to close that until after the playoffs. That way, now you've got a full season and more with everybody. And who knows, maybe after this, you're like, you know what, we were this close. A lot of these guys are going to come back. Let's try to run it back again. Maybe you have guys decide, you know what, actually, I'm going to transfer, or I'm going to declare for the draft, or I'm not. And then who knows, maybe you go ahead and you slide into that. You don't have to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and I know we've mentioned it. I don't remember how much in depth wise we talked about it on the show, but I've talked about it and with you previously. Is Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State? He has an amazing take on how he handles the transfer portal, because he was asked, what do you think about the transfer portal, and how do you deal with that during a time that you're making a run in the playoff?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you've got to understand, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that the portal's open during this time frame. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think if they could avoid that, and keep it closed until after bowl season and after the playoff, you'd probably have more people participating in their bowl games too.
100%.
But
because then you're competing for another starting spot somewhere else.
Correct. And if you have one whale of a game in your bowl game, you could maybe up your money that you're going to get at whatever school that you're going to. But Kenny Dillingham, he was also asked, how do you handle, every program loses people to the portal.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle this during a time that you're trying to make a run? He says, we talked to him.
Yeah.
And we understand that maybe this isn't working. It isn't the ideal situation that they originally thought they were entering into. But he said, if a player comes to us and we're talking to them, they want to enter the portal, we'll help them.
Yeah.
He says, during this time, we're going to help them. But we're going to ask them, are you all in to where you want to be on the ride for what we're doing here?
Right.
And if they say yes, well, then you need to make the commitment that you're with us. We will still work with other schools to find you the best spot for your landing out of the portal. But while you're here, you need to come to the meetings. You need to come to workouts. You need to be practicing. You need to be doing anything. If you can't commit to that, no hard feelings, but you can leave. And he wasn't being mean about it. He wasn't being sarcastic about it. We understand if it's something that you just can't allot enough time to be part of what we're doing for Arizona State in the playoff, that's fine. Best of luck to you. But if you can and want to, we would love to have you here because they did make the commitment for this season. So if they want to stick around, hey, perfect.
And I think that says a lot to him, and obviously that's why Arizona State's in the playoffs right now, because of that mentality. And I think a lot of coaches, if they want to truly be successful, both in having a lot of long-term success and honestly taking advantage of what the transfer portal is now, you're going to have that approach of, look, man, like, look, we're here for you. I'm here for you. But much to your point, if you sign up to work here, which essentially that's what they've just turned it into, of, look, you're working for Arizona State at this current time.
You're in contract.
When our season is done, hey, then you go wherever you want your heart's desires. We will help you. But until then, I need you to show up to work. I need you to do what you want to do. But after that, you're free.
Yeah, and it's interesting the different takes that, because I know of some coaches, if they hear that there's a kid that's toying with the portal, get out. We don't want you. Yeah. Did you just say that?
I know. I'm gonna
But seriously, there are coaches, and I wasn't meaning to not say who it was, but yeah, Dabo Swinney. There are others too, though.
Oh yeah,
there are other coaches that do the same thing. That if you even utter the word portal, get out. We don't want you if you're even going to talk about it. Well, you know what? Things change.
Yes.
Dabo, when you were at the job you were at before Clemson, did you say, I'm going to the highest bidder, or first time no, a situation presented itself. You saw it was the best move for you.
Yep.
And you made the move. Okay. We get it. Things happen. Life changes. Situations change to where they're not ideal for you in the current way. You need to make a move and a change. It happens that way.
Well, and plus, like you said, and much like, the coach of Arizona State, why don't you just sit down and talk to him? Like, hey, I heard you declared, I heard you want to transfer. Just tell me why. What could I have done better that you felt that you wanted to leave? Is it me? Is it another coach? Did you just not like the system? Do you want a fresh start? Just ask what it is, because I think a lot of coaches and a lot of people in general forget. Sometimes you have to take those harsh criticisms and self-reflections from other people. Because if you surround yourself with your assistant coaches, yeah, coach, you're doing great. I'm saying that because I want to keep my job.
Get better.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, hey, why do you want to leave? Like, look, I don't really like when my players leave. Tell me why. I'm not going to get mad. Can't stop you from leaving. You're going to leave whether you want to or not. Tell me why. What is Clemson doing wrong, or what is this school doing better that we're not doing, so that I can fix it and make it comparable.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing that if that happens tomorrow with SMU and Penn State, if something happens to Drew Aller, who's going in? Yeah, even for a play. A play, I bet they do the Wildcat thing. I honestly, if his helmet pops off, he's got to come out. Well, they'll just run a Wildcat for one play.
And look, if they put it on Indeed, I'll apply. I'll be on a plane before they know it.
As a backup quarterback for the Nittany Lions.
With that NIL money, sign me up.
Give me $50,000 and I'll play.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You need
I'll
me
walk
to take
around with a clipboard for $50,000. Shoot.
You need me to take a hit? I got you. Get out of there. I'll take that hit.
It better be 100 if that's the case. If I enter the game, up the ante.
Double the money.
All right, wrapping up, because with the middle game, that's Clemson and Texas. We don't talk about that because we're not SEC talk or ACC talk. We're Big Talk. So let's go to the finale tomorrow night. Ohio Stadium, the Shoe, the number 8 seeded but 6th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes host the 9th seeded or 7th ranked Tennessee Volunteers at what is funny. I don't know if you saw it. Tennessee fans on Apple Maps changed the name of Ohio Stadium to Neyland North.
Nice.
But is there a hangover from Michigan?
I think there is. And I've kind of said this before, and it was said yesterday on the radio when somebody was talking about it. Tennessee was the number 1 rushing team in the SEC. And, much like we talked about with tonight versus Notre Dame and IU, it's going to be hard to throw the ball, and Chip Kelly likes to run it, but they didn't really run it that well against Michigan. They're not going to be able to run it that well against Tennessee's defense, which I think is staunchly better than Michigan's. And all honesty, if you look at how Tennessee usually does their plays, it's like what Michigan did last year, and honestly this year. They have a big offensive line with a great rushing attack, and honestly, they have a better overall quarterback than Michigan does. And that's honestly what kind of held Michigan back from, I think, doing significantly better and winning by a much larger margin than what they did, is because the quarterback play held them back. And I don't see Tennessee having that problem. And I think for Ohio State, once again, you have a quarterback that is a big athletic body. But if you're trying to, even if you're mainly focusing on the run game, you're trying to, break it up maybe with a couple dink and ducks from Will Howard, or maybe an over the middle shot. I have a lot of questions if Will Howard can be that guy or not.
Yeah, excuse me. He left a lot to be desired from that Michigan game. Some of the decisions he made throwing the ball in situations that should have come away with points. Now he doesn't do the kicking, so the 2 field goals that were missed by Ohio State, not his issue. He got them in position to score. It's the interceptions, the one in the end zone and one at the goal line, that really threw that wrench even bigger into the spokes for Ohio State. So I don't know if there's as much of a hangover as what maybe you think it could, and I'm not saying that it won't be. There won't be. I'm just saying I think that it's. I honestly, if Chip Kelly would have just not been brazen enough to say, well, we're going to run it up the middle. You have good running backs. Run some sweeps occasionally,
right?
Or some end arounds, or what? How about a little bubble screen and get Igbuka into the run after the catch? Yards after the catch. You can run by passing. So it just because it goes into the stat book as a pass doesn't mean you can't run by passing. A quick little flare out. And excuse me, run a guy in motion and have him flare out enough to where he's catching on the run forward.
Yeah. And I will say too, because, obviously we talked about it. If Ryan Day loses, is he more than likely going to be out of, the Buckeyes? Urban Meyer did an interview, and he brought up what I think is a really good point. And I wonder if this maybe doesn't halt the Buckeyes as quickly as pulling the trigger on that. Because Urban Meyer brought up a good point. If you fire Ryan Day, you're losing at least half of your roster is gone.
Unless you hire Urban Meyer.
Maybe.
Let's say it this way. Urban Meyer is one heck of a good college coach. He wasn't a good pro coach.
No.
Much like
no.
But I think if that were the case where they say, yes, we're getting rid of Ryan Day, they're gonna call Urban Meyer before they actually kick Day to the curb. Yeah. Because if they've got Urban Meyer to replace, Urban Meyer's still got his fingers in the ointment,
the college football world,
and in Columbus.
Oh yeah,
he's still
he loves
very influential
Columbus.
in Columbus. So I think the crazies that say Ryan Day should be fired anyway after just the Michigan loss will be the ones that say we absolutely don't want Urban Meyer. He left us before. Okay, fine. Whatever. I don't care.
Urban Meyer,
who are you going to replace with a better? Who is a better coach that you can replace a gentleman that has only lost 10 games in the 7 or 8 seasons he's been the coach at Ohio State? Granted, he's lost 4 of them against Michigan, the team you don't want to lose to. But who are you going to replace? One that goes 5-1 against Michigan in 6 years, but loses 15 other games? No, you're not going to be happy about that either.
Yeah, well, watch the first time they ever lose to Penn State. They'll beat Michigan, but they lose to Penn State. Oh, what are we doing? Why are we losing to Penn State? But I will say, if anybody says, "Oh, well, Urban Meyer left us," no. Urban Meyer had a lot of baggage and had a lot of conduct issues because of his coaching staff. He had to leave. And then he goes to the NFL. He has more baggage, more personal conduct issues.
Well, he also didn't even know his players' names. He called them by numbers still.
Yeah.
Sorry, he didn't work out as a Bobby Petrino, Nick Saban, and Urban Meyer, 3 of the worst pro
NFL coaches
I've ever seen, who were great at the time that they left college football.
And heck, you see that with players all the time. We see it with coaches. Fantastic at the collegiate level. Heck, we even see it with coordinators all the time. Great coordinators, terrible head coaches.
Yeah,
and vice versa.
Yeah. So tomorrow's game again, Tennessee is going to be a very difficult win for Ohio State. It really is. It's going to be difficult for them to enforce their will upon them. This is let's call it what it is. This isn't IU.
Yep.
This isn't Penn State.
Yep.
This is Tennessee. Tennessee is Josh Heupel is a great coach. I really like Josh Heupel, and he knows how to coach a program. And the fact that these guys, they got beat by Arkansas. Okay, great. People are damning them for that. No, you know what? It's just like a Big Ten team losing a game that they shouldn't have lost because they lost to Illinois.
Right.
Or whatever.
Almost every team, with the exception of, you could say, Oregon, Georgia, Oregon and Texas, has a bad loss on their record somehow, somewhere, by some team. And quick fun fact: Tennessee is on a 27-game losing streak if they have to face a top 10 team on the road.
I think the weather is gonna play
a huge factor.
A huge factor with Tennessee. It's not. They're used to going to bowl games where it's beautiful.
Right, it's sunshiny, it's warm.
It might be rainy, but you know what? It's occasionally, but we're used to this. I don't know. It's going to be difficult, and I think the Big Ten comes out of this weekend 2-1, and I think that one is IU losing tonight. I think Ohio State, the Ohio State game, might be the best of the 3 because it might be down to the last possession, defensive stand or a score, whatever. I'm not going to predict that even, but it could be the last possession. Who has the ball last? And it's not necessarily that they're putting the ball or putting points on the board and whoever has the ball last. It's whoever has the ball last and is able to put points on the board.
Right.
I think it could be a 24-21 game. It could be 27-21. It's a one-score game, and it's gonna end late in the game.
Yeah.
And I still think that Ohio State is the most talented roster in college football, up into including each and every of the other 11 rosters in this tournament. They played Oregon in Autzen Stadium to a 1-point loss. If they had 3 more seconds, they had a timeout. They could have called timeout and at least had an opportunity at a game-winning field goal.
Right. I said the only thing, and I said it at the beginning of the season, the only thing that made me hesitant about Ohio State is, what does their quarterback situation look like? And I know the announcers, I think, have tried to kind of hype Will Howard up quite a bit, like, he has all this big game experience.
Excuse me.
While, yes, financials play a big part of it because of NIL and whatnot, there's a reason why Kansas State let him walk and let him go to Ohio State. Not saying he's terrible. He's serviceable, but there's still a lot of question marks with him. And yes, he's great if it's like goal to go because he's a big body. He can just power it in, but he's got to be able to get you down there, and that's where he struggles.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fantastic weekend of Big Ten football. The Big Ten is involved in 3 of the 4 games this week. They conceivably could only have 1 game involved next week, but they could be involved in all 4 games if things go right for the Big Ten Conference. And I tell you what, there will be people just imploding if the Big Ten goes 3-0 this weekend and represents 4 teams of the semifinal or the quarterfinals.
Right.
I think there will be Alabama wouldn't have lost to Ohio State. You know, whatever. Shut up. You know, I don't want to hear one thing about, well, if Alabama were. No, I don't care. I don't care. Don't tell me Alabama would have done better, because you have no way of knowing that, because they lost to Vanderbilt.
I say Alabama would have done better if they didn't have to face Oklahoma in the first round. In the state of Tennessee, where they went 0-2 this year.
Yeah. They couldn't beat anybody in Tennessee. So let's just leave that one go and say, better luck next year.
Tell you what, we'll do like college basketball. We'll do an NIT, and we'll have Oklahoma versus Alabama in the first round in Nissan Stadium in Tennessee, and we'll see who comes out the winner.
Yeah. Well, it was a 3-touchdown win for the Sooners, so
right,
wasn't even close. And especially in a game where they had to win.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they had to win that game in order to be considered. They would have been a lock. They would have been an absolute lock.
They would have been they would have probably made a huge argument to be in the SEC title game too.
But they didn't.
Nope.
So they have no room to complain that they didn't get in. Well, we have better losses. No, shut up. I don't care. I really don't. Don't tell me you have better losses, because you know what? Have better wins.
They did. They beat Georgia.
Wins.
They beat Georgia.
Think about this. IU played only like 1 or 2 quality opponents this year. They only lost 1 of those games. They beat every single one of those bad opponents by a ton of points.
Mm-hmm.
Vanderbilt is not a good opponent, and Alabama lost to them. Oklahoma this season, not a good opponent. Alabama lost to them by 3 touchdowns. So, stop.
And again, here's the funniest thing is that the people that complain about, the out of conference scheduling, you face the most cupcake out of conference schedule, and
What's
your
that,
only
Florida
losses,
A&M?
your only 3 losses were all in the SEC.
Yeah, all your losses were in the SEC. So let's stop, okay? But we talked way too long about Alabama in a time that Alabama is not
irrelevant.
Represented. They're irrelevant this playoff tournament. So, but that brings us to a close to today's newest episode of Big Talk. Tony, why don't you tell everybody how they can find us?
You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That is B1G Talk. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and the TikToks. See what I did there? TikToks. At B1G_talk. You can find us there as well. You can find us every week on the All Sports All Plays Network, which you can also get on any app store on any phone that you got. I don't care if it's Apple, Android, BlackBerry, in between. We have an app on there. You can get it. And
There's an app for that.
There is an app for that. And Sam is nice enough that later on today, he will upload it to wherever you get your podcasts at. So that way you can listen to us on the road. You can listen to all the crazy shenanigans. And I hope you're not watching it while you're driving. But if you are, you can potentially
crazier things have happened.
See that Sam got a ton of ink and is secretly in love with Santa because he has him tattooed all over his chest.
That's right. Oh, but all right. Well, that brings us to the close of the newest Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. Thanks for coming in, everybody. For Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you next time.